Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Brent Lang, Peter DeBruge, and Owen Gleiberman. Like many others at Variety, those three are getting ready for the Sundance Film Festival, which begins on Thursday. This trio gives us the long-term view of Sundance and what it has meant to the film industry as the festival goes through a big moment of transition. Variety will be producing 3 digital dailies out of Sundance starting on Thursday. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Netflix has made good on its promise to revise its bid for Warner Bros. Discovery to an all-cash offer for $83 billion. That's a joust against Paramount Skydance's aggressive campaign to convince shareholders and regulators that it should be the owner of Warner Bros. Discovery. More to come on that this week for sure. Netflix reports Q4 earnings later today. The Berlin Film Festival has unveiled its lineup for next month. It has a bunch of artsy titles from filmmakers whose names are hard for this Yank to pronounce. But it's a robust lineup that includes rosebush pruning and Channing Tatum's latest movie, Josephine. The European film market that coincides with the Berlinale also should be robust. The festival runs February 12th through February 22nd. Imagine Entertainment and food company Land O'Lakes have teamed on an initiative to modernize the portrayal of rural America in movies and television. The effort is dubbed the Modern Rural Collective, and they've produced a toolkit for filmmakers and producers with a lot of facts and figures and anecdotal info that is in contrast to the stereotypes around small towns and agricultural communities. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Brent Lang, Variety's big boss of film and media, and Variety's chief film critics Owen Gleiberman and Peter DeBruge discuss Sundance in this moment of transition for the festival and the indie film business overall. Peter was busy reviewing a movie when we got started talking, so he joins the conversation a little later, but through the magic of editing, we made it work. Brent Lang and Owen Gleiberman, thank you for joining me. Obviously, this will be a momentous Sundance Film Festival, so there's a lot to talk about, but let's start with the basic question. What are you both excited about? Are there films or filmmakers that you're really keen to see or get to know? Let's start with Brent.
The one nice thing about Sundance is you never really know what's going to be the film that really breaks out in a big way. There's always a really exciting element of surprise. But I would say on paper, there's a film called The Invite by Olivia Wilde, who I really enjoyed Booksmart. And this has Edward Norton and Penelope Cruz. And I think that could be a really exciting movie. It's about a couple that gets invited to participate in orgies with another couple. And then there's another film by Greg Araki called I Want Your Sex that sounds really interesting. Olivia Wilde is also in that, and Cooper Hoffman, and I think it's going to be a very provocative. And then one of the other ones that I'm very interested in is a movie called Hanging by a Wire, which is a documentary about some kids in Pakistan who they take a cable car to school and the wire snaps, and there's a very elaborate rescue operation. And I've heard that it's really similar to The Rescue, a documentary that I liked a lot.
What about you, Owen?
Well, I want to second what Brent said about how when you go into Sundance, you really always get surprised. And that's the thing that I'm looking forward to. When I just think back over the years, movies like Fruitvale Station, Ryan Coogler's first film, or In the Bedroom, Todd Field's first film, nobody going into Sundance was like, oh, we're all anticipating that. And it just hits home to me the way that at Sundance, when you see a really fantastic film, you're not just seeing a great movie, you're seeing oftentimes the birth of a filmmaker who will go out into the world and will make films for the next 30 years. And the surprise of it is the essence of it. That said, there are always films I'm looking forward to. One of them is The Moment, the first starring role of Charlie XCX. And I'm looking forward to that for a couple of reasons. I think she's a very exciting pop star, and I always like to see stars like that who seem like they have the potential as big screen actors to see what they can do. But also, it is a mockumentary in which Charlie XCX plays a character very much modeled on herself. I like that form. I think it's very resonant. So I'm totally primed to see that when you're in a big audience, as you are at Sundance. There's just a sacramental quality to movies, to what they've always been. What it's really about is that mystery and surprise of what they're able to do as a filmmaker.
Peter DeBruge, what are some of the films you're most interested to screen?
It's sometimes hard to predict. It's not like a Cannes or a Toronto where you can look at the big name directors and think, I'm excited for that. Although I'm totally excited that Greg Araki has a movie called I Want Your Sex. He's also bringing a really spiffed up restoration of Mysterious Skin, which showed at Sundance the very first year I attended in 2004. Yeah, I love the next section. It's even the misfit toys that don't fit into the competition sections, that are a little bit avant-garde, that are kind of pushing the medium forward, that might be more experimental. That's where in the past movies like Sound of My Voice or last year East of Wall came out of there. And, I've only seen one film in that section so far because we put If I Go, Will They Miss Me on our 10 directors to watch list. I can absolutely vouch for that movie. I describe it as Killer of Sheep meets Beasts of the Southern Wild. I mean, it's just like this magical realist slice of LA life in a community that's often overlooked and such a special voice.
One thing that is unfortunate, and it is definitely something that I participate in myself, but when these films end, there's a rush to kind of get onto a social media platform to share your instant reaction. And I think particularly with something like Sundance or Cannes, a lot of these films are more artistic. They're not easily accessible, and they really benefit from some rumination and some meditation about the quality. And this idea that, something is instantly an Oscar contender or a masterpiece or instantly a disaster is really unfair to the filmmakers.
There was a world where we had to think about it and sleep on it and write a column for the next day. And in that same vein, it's no surprise to listeners of Daily Variety that the independent film market was in the throes of transition, dealing with technological disruption, dealing with distribution disruption. Sundance has somewhat a victim of its own success in the sense that, big sales, whether they were big dollars or just big buzzy titles, would come up and be part of bidding wars. Do you think the emphasis on the sale, the rights deal, has that taken away from the sense of appreciating the quality of film, especially when you're there?
I think that in some ways that it's sort of been decided for us because of the business issues that the indie sector faces, and the all-night bidding wars, which as a reporter were extremely exciting, although exhausting to cover, for things like Manchester by the Sea or Birth of a Nation or Brooklyn or The Big Sick. Those have really gone out the window. I mean, with some cause, because it's kind of a terrible business idea to spend $12 to $20 million like an overnight negotiation. And I think studios and streamers did realize there was some value in sort of slowing the process down. It was kind of an agent-driven model where they were trying to jack up excitement and jack up the price of the film. So you don't really see that. In fact, most of the movies from Sundance last year sold after the festival, often long after the festival. But that said, I do think that the types of movies that Sundance has highlighted in its most recent iterations have tended to be very, very small independent film. They haven't been the types of movies like A Little Miss Sunshine that really have a crowd-pleasing quality that allow them to enter the mainstream in a big way. I haven't seen that for a few years, I think.
I do think that's an issue. I think that the sales have overshadowed what Sundance is really about. And if you ask me what Sundance is really about, going back to what Robert Redford intended, what Michelle Satter has been doing through the Institute all these many years, they were really about finding a platform for the voices that weren't getting heard, the kind of stories that don't come through the mainstream. And I think that Sundance, while all of the sales activity over the years, the boom that existed in the late 90s and early 2000s for indie films at the box office, that brought a whole lot of attention, that lifted Sundance to this kind of leadership position. And they've used that position not to worry about programming to reinforce that, not trying to find the commercial movies, but continuing to stay true to the Redford mission all along. And it is the last year and Redford is the past. I think he would be proud to see that it's another lineup that's really about diversity. They're talking the talk about, we want to diversify who our storytellers are, who we're empowering to direct and to produce. and to star. I mean, Sundance is doing the job of going through the 18,000 submissions they get to find and lift up those voices. We get distracted by the thing about the $20 million sale that happens once in a blue moon.
I always used to love Sundance deal culture because there was a decadent side to it, when a movie like Happy Texas would be bought for 12 million or something like that. But the bottom line was that those all-night bidding wars and the incredible price tags, not only that they got a lot of headlines, but that they happened because they were about the fact that these movies really could go out into the world and make money. And that's how independent film, starting in the late 80s and 90s at Sundance, changed movie culture, changed culture in the world, period. That's how influential these films were. That's the romance of Sundance and the excitement of it and the importance of it. And those things are all in danger. The thing I've been wondering is, why is it that the audience for popcorn movies, they're out there, they're going, but the audience for artistic films, for lack of a better word, they want to stay home and say, well, okay, I'll just watch that along with my quality TV. It may be that these films are a little harder to get to, but I want to think that there is still an audience that will go out to see a small film at a theater. It's not over yet, but that's the side of the business that's just very challenged right now.
To the point, Brent, about the slowing down of that sales process, there is no greater example of how it is a buyer's market. That tells you that the power of the agent and the packager and the sales agent is dwarfed by small handful of companies and distributors that really make an impact. Well, I know there will also be a very kind of an emotional overlay to this Sundance for two big reasons. One, as everybody knows, it's the last one in Park City. It's moving on to Boulder, Colorado in 2027. And it is the first festival since the passing of Robert Redford, the founder of the Sundance Institute, the godfather of American independent film. What do you anticipate that we're going to hear from people that will be paying tribute to Robert Redford?
Well, I think the opening night dinner, their big annual fundraiser, is basically being turned into a tribute to Robert Redford. And I'm sure that the opening night remarks will really reflect on him and his legacy. You could really make a case that no movie star in the 20th had a more profound impact on the medium than Robert Redford. And not just the film festival, but also the Sundance Institute and what they do in terms of providing support to emerging artists and giving them feedback and allowing them to really grow as filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Brent said, and he did launch something that became so big that just took on a life of its own. But I think it's very interesting to consider sort of the symbolic value that Robert Redford and who he was had with Sundance. On the one hand, he was saying, let's make movies that are un-Hollywood stories. Let's make independent films. That's what I stand for as an artist. But Redford had so much Hollywood in his DNA. He really did come almost from the old Hollywood. That's when he started back in the late 50s, early 60s. The movie that really launched him into superstardom, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, was a Western. So he had some of that old Hollywood DNA, and then he became a king of the new Hollywood. So that was two Hollywoods. And then I think it's very important to note that he kind of shepherded Sundance as the next Hollywood.
And I think he was really interested in sort of demystifying the American experience, like both as an actor and as a director. And if you look at some of what I think are his greatest films, things like Downhill Racer or The Candidate, or my favorite of the movies he directed, Quiz Show, they really take a look at our political culture, about the ideas of success, and kind of the limitations of a kind of crass commercialism that I think this country is very guilty of.
And on top of everything else, he actually cared about the earth. He was way ahead of that. Well, let's button up with a couple of favorite memories from Park City over the years. Let's start with Owen.
Well, I always just go back to my first Sundance Festival when I got there in 1995. Didn't know what to expect. Saw my first movie there, Party Girl, starring Parker Posey, which I loved. And that told me right away that this festival was going to be about just seeing amazing things. I also saw the documentary Crumb at that festival, which ended up being just about my favorite film of that year. So right away, it was about major films, but it was also about just all the filmmakers and actors and people you could meet, the way that you were really just interfacing with great artists, and on a very, very casual level.
What about you, Brent?
For me, some of it is just being in the room when a movie is hit in a big way. I'll never forget being at the premiere of Manchester by the Sea, and that film just really kind of like swept over the audience and sort of carried them along. Or Call Me By Your Name, when Timothée Chalamet, nobody even knew who he was, and you could tell this guy is going to be big star. And I think it's also just kind of, the fact is, in a lot of ways, Park City is a terrible place to have a film festival. It's inaccessible. It's, the stormy weather. It's icy. People are constantly slipping. It's completely freezing. And yet that makes it a really wonderful experience because you've had to do so much. You've had to put in so much work before you even get into the theater that you want to be transported, and you can feel that kind of bond with your fellow audience members. You've actually gone to the top of the mountain because you really love this art form and you believe that it's still important. And I think that's what I sort of feel fondest about Park City and about Sundance.
Peter, tell us some of your favorite memories.
I have to say that it's been really important to me to attend Sundance in person, to be part of the energy in the room. I'm always perched in the front row of the Eccles balcony. And there I can kind of just absorb the love as it kind of emanates. And you can feel when one of those things, a Little Miss Sunshine or a Juno, when it comes alive 20 feet from stardom, that was an opening night movie one year, or Whiplash. I mean, those are films that just kind of electrify the room. And when you're there in that, front row balcony seat, you feel the applause, you see all the activity down below.
Wow. Well, safe travels to Park City. Looking forward to seeing you. And thank you so much for sharing these great memories. As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Don't miss my colleague William Earle's great coverage of Landman Season 2. It was a great ride for the Billy Bob Thornton, Taylor Sheridan drama that is set in the world of big oil in Texas. Bill's got great recaps and a fun look at co-star Sam Elliott's amazing work in Season 2. You can find it all on Variety.com. It's a new year, and Variety is back on our annual worldwide trek of film festivals and markets. Starting Friday, we'll produce 3 digital dailies out of the Gothenburg Film Festival in Sweden. And starting January 29th, we'll produce the first of 4 digital dailies out of the International Film Festival Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Before we go, congrats to Leila Kobo and Jason Lipschutz. The 2 longtime veterans at Billboard have been promoted to co-chief content officers. Billboard is one of Variety's sibling news brands, and it is even older than Variety, which is 120 years old. Billboard was born in 1894. Yes, 1894. Billboard's previous editorial leader, Hannah Karp, has just joined Warner Music as Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer. Congrats and Godspeed to Hannah, too. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Brent Lang, Peter DeBruge, and Owen Gleiberman. Sticks, Nicks, Hick Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.